If the security of personnel, voters, election observers, and election materials cannot be guaranteed, the life of innocent young men and women, as well as prospects for free, fair, credible, and peaceful elections would be greatly jeopardized. Consequently, the Commission has decided to reschedule the 2015 general elections thus. The national elections, i.e. Presidential and National Assembly, are now to hold on March 28, 2015.
Sir, you said the election has been shifted to March 28th.
INEC, not being a security agency that could by itself guarantee protection for personnel and materials, as well as voters during elections or even observers, the Commission cannot lightly wave off the advice by the nation's security chiefs.
Okay, with me is Sylvester Ebodage, a fellow journalist, a political analyst based in Nigeria, but obviously traveling worldwide. We've got one more day to go before the Nigerian elections start, before Nigerians go out to the polls to cast their votes in a much anticipated election that the whole world is watching closely. Now, how prepared is INEC to handle this election with good credibility?
Thank you very much. Preparation, or as it were, preparedness of INEC has been neither here nor there. It's been trailed with mixed reactions and serious concerns because many believe that the electoral body has not been as adequately prepared as it should be, bearing in mind that the electoral body had about 4 years to prepare for this election. But the way it has gone about its activities, the way it has carried out its preparation has not been considered the best that it could offer the country. Also considering the fact that there's high expectations. We've had 16 years of democracy for the first time in the history of Nigeria. We've had uninterrupted transition from one civilian rule to the other. So many had thought that by now we would have a lot ready for these elections, beginning from verification of voter registration and the continuous voter registration exercises that were carried out. We saw lots of flaws in them. And then, of course, accusations and counter-accusations from sometimes from the opposition party and sometimes from the ruling party, because many of us still remember when some isolated elections that took place in the last 2 years or 3, INEC had the opportunity of testing some of these new ideas with regards to the use of the card readers, where it could have tested these machines, as it were, and then of course with those smaller elections like the state governorship election in Anambra, in Osun, in Ekiti, and some by-elections that took place in the course of the last 2 or 3 years. It had that opportunity where it could have done its best, and then people would have, Nigerians would have seen how it works, where the issues are, where the flaws are, and so that necessary corrections are made, adjustments are made. The electoral body at the time did say that because of the sensitive nature, particularly with elections in Ekiti and Osun, because of the tension at the time, the sensitivity of those elections, that it was pointless using the card readers and of course the permanent voters card. Instead, they went the way of the temporary voters card, and then the way we usually voted in the past. Manual verification of voters and so on. Even though the elections, after it was held, didn't stop the losers from challenging the results of the elections. So many people feel extremely disappointed that as at February 14, when the election was supposed to hold until, for security reasons, the elections were rescheduled. The INEC at the time said it was ready, that everything was set, even though as at then millions of permanent voters cards were still being printed in faraway China. And the ad hoc staff of the electoral body who were supposed to use the card readers and the various machines for the elections had not even been sufficiently exposed to the technology and the workings of the card readers. I mean, just a little over 2 weeks ago, the electoral body, for the first time, had a mock election where the card readers were largely tested across the geopolitical zones. And these are things that INEC ought to have done. We're talking about the preparedness or otherwise of the electoral body. So that's why I'm taking you through some of these things. So we can appreciate that. And this is arguable though. The leadership of the electoral body has not been honest with Nigerians.
Acknowledge the presence of the NWC, led by the National.
Before this time, about 5 local governments were under the control of Boko Haram in this state. So many people lost their lives, not to talk about property. As we are talking today, Michigan local government was recaptured by our gallant forces. Today, they call for Adamawa State, for Yobe State, for Borno. We will soon recover all our territories. All of us here feel burdened. I feel so burdened about the excess of Boko Haram.
What is their reputation, though, beforehand in previous elections, coming to this current one?
The last elections, particularly the 2011 presidential elections and the governorship elections, was globally commended. Was adjudged the freest and fairest and most credible elections in Nigeria's recent history, and so. The of course, there were pockets of concerns raised by the observers, both local and international observers. And of course, the electoral body had responsibility to make sure that these coming elections naturally would be an improvement on the last elections. Of course, every election in the past has had its peculiar issues, but many have come to agree that the last elections were largely credible. There was no candidate that won, or that was adjudged to have won, or that was declared a winner that shouldn't have won. Now, by what margin remains to be decided. Many have argued that in some places some results were actually more than the actual number of registered voters
in a particular constituency.
From those polling units, which of course wasn't proven in any courts, because I'm not aware to date that any results were obtained, any verdict were obtained because of such issues. So yes, the electoral body, given the last elections, it was largely credible or acceptably credible, you know. But many expected that, you know, when people talk about credible elections, it is not just about what happens on the day of the election.
It's a process.
The entire process must be seen to be credible. And with regards the preparation or preparedness of INEC and these issues with regards the voter registration and continuous voter registration exercise, the distribution of the permanent voters card, you know, the way they have been carried out leaves much to be desired. For instance, many INEC came up and said in a northeastern state like Borno, that PVC collections, now by PVC I mean the permanent voters card, PVC collection was 80-something%. As at the time INEC made these claims, 6 local governments were under the direct control of the insurgents, making it a no-go area.
That is Boko Haram.
Boko Haram insurgents, making it a no-go area for any INEC official, let alone distributing the PVCs. Now, and this was out of about 18 or 19 local government areas. Now, you're saying that about 12 or 11 local governments was responsible for the over 80% collection. And that attracted a lot of condemnation. There were allegations of a conspiracy against the current president, and with INEC in collaboration, that INEC indeed was working with the opposition party or elements linked with the opposition party to, as it were, undermine the chances of the current president by making sure that the distribution of the PVC was skewed in favor of states where the opposition party had a very strong hold. Now, these, in states like Rivers and other southern states where there were no issues, no violence, no trouble, yet people can't get their PVCs. As of yesterday, somebody who went to collect his PVC is told, "Oh, you are among those whose PVCs have not arrived."
But there's
Come
one day
again
to
tomorrow."
go. There's
Just
1 day to go.
1 day to go.
Before people go to the voting
A few
polls.
days ago, an NGO did come up with a very strong-worded letter to the president, alleging that at least 12.4 million Nigerians, eligible voters, are being deliberately disenfranchised by INEC because they can't get their PVCs. And INEC is insisting that without your permanent voter's card,
you cannot
you
vote.
will not be allowed to vote.
So how does this affect the election? What do we say about this one election that is such a game changer when INEC says it needed to postpone because it needed to be ready, and also highlights that security reasons? Do we now say that this perhaps is politically motivated?
Well, that remains to be seen, because INEC didn't even admit it needed to do anything. INEC insisted that it was ready. That press conference took place about almost past 12 midnight. That 7th of February, when the INEC chairman, addressed the media. He hinged everything, as it were, on the issue of security, that INEC was ready. But 6 weeks after, we still see that there are lots of issues. But because we don't have another electoral body, as a country, this is one election that must hold on schedule. Because if the elections don't hold on schedule, we'll be creating a constitutional crisis. Because the elections must hold at least 90 days before the expiration of the current administration. So the elections must hold on schedule. And of course, we are also aware, as the media, that there are also elements who are waiting to take advantage of any further postponement to cause mayhem in the country by way of violent protests and, which could further plunge the country into chaos. We are already dealing with so much in the Northeast, and even some of the effects of the last electoral violence from the fallout of the 2011 elections. Nigeria is still licking the wounds of that violence that erupted. So we don't want any further crisis, and that's why every major stakeholder, including the political actors, have come together to agree that the elections must hold as rescheduled for the March 28th. But looking at these issues, like I said, the credibility or otherwise of an election is not just about how the votes are done on the day of elections, but rather the whole process that culminates in that exercise of actually voting and having the votes counted. Because if 12.4 million Nigerians who have registered, who are eager to vote, cannot vote, I can imagine a situation where immediately after the elections, lots of people are going to start, they're going to commence a barrage of suits against INEC and the federal government on why the results of the elections, if they so want to, why the results of the elections should not be accepted. Because 12.4 million is a number that is significant enough to determine the outcome of an election.
That's right. That's
so
very true.
INEC has not done what it was supposed to do, even though INEC has argued where we can't force people to come out of their homes to come pick up their PVCs, but we have records, information of millions of Nigerians who have come out, but they can't get their PVCs. And this is not an interesting scenario, but we have seen cases where PVCs meant for a particular state was sent to another state. A governor of one of the southwestern states in Nigeria was raising alarm. He raised an alarm how that only about 40% distribution in his state. He's even a governor, from the opposition party.
But concerned
Even
the
though,
manner in which
even though,
the distribution is happening.
even though the opposition party insisted that or continued to allege that the ruling party influenced INEC to reschedule the elections because they were afraid of losing the election, or they wanted to perfect their own strategies to rig the elections. But even some of their states were victims. So INEC, like I said, did not live up to its bidding. We expected a lot more from them. They had every money they requested for was made available, so they had no reason to
have delivered.
To create a crisis in the country today.
That's right. Still talking about INEC, how are they going to cater for the locally displaced people due to the insurgence of Boko Haram? You find that some people had to move from one particular state to go maybe into the city for security reasons. How are those being catered for? Are they being catered for at all?
Well, I wish an official of the electoral body was in a position here to respond to that. There have been arguments that the internally displaced persons should be given the opportunity to also exercise their fundamental right to also participate in the elections, and should not be disenfranchised because they themselves are victims. But INEC, with what it has said, if you don't have your PVC, you will not be able to vote. So I don't know what they are doing about that. There have been issues in the last few days as to what they have decided to do with regards to the IDPs being able to vote. I cannot categorically say what it is they've decided to do, but I think that is also a major problem. So that's why many of us had issues with the claims by INEC with regards its success rate of PVC distribution, because the people who had registered to vote, many of them had either relocated completely from the state, or have relocated from the places where they registered to vote. And the PVCs are not distributed, just like that. You must take them to the localities, where the individuals registered, because that was how I got mine. I went to the polling unit where I had registered and identified myself, gave them a copy of the temporary voter's card, and I was given the permanent voter's card. Now, if these persons have either misplaced their TVCs, of course, if you misplace your TVC, you come with your passport photograph and you apply, and then once they check and they can identify you, they can still give it to you. But the point is, most of these people had relocated completely from that environment, and many of them, they don't even, many had died. You're talking about thousands of people being killed by the terrorist group Boko Haram over the last three years.
Bypass Maiduguri is one of the camps set up for the internally displaced persons who are seeking shelter after the recent massacre by insurgents in Baga. A total of 900 people, 40% of whom are children, are being catered for in the camp by NEMA in collaboration with the state government. President Jonathan, during his visit to the camp, expressed his sadness seeing victims of insurgency take their communities from Boko Haram.
But let me reassure all Nigerians and indeed internally displaced persons that government is working very hard to make sure that you don't stay in these camps for too long.
While appreciating all agencies involved in emergency services, and in particular those who were assisted in cushioning the effect of terror, President Jonathan urged both the federal and state agencies managing the IDPs, saying the IDPs will be protected and well fed in various camps in Borno State. On arrival in Maiduguri, President Jonathan addressed officers and men of the 7th Division at YVONNE Katsande, where he saluted their courage, faithfulness, and loyalty to their fatherland in fighting Boko Haram. He encouraged them to do their best, pledging that all their dues and entitlements will not be.
I know the trauma that normally passes through when I hear some negative stories. What I can do is to continue to encourage you to do your best for this country, and surely you'll be rewarded accordingly.
President Jonathan also visited the wounded soldiers in their hospital bed at the 7th Division Medical Services and Hospital, where they are currently receiving medical care. From Maiduguri, Borno State, Segun Lawale, NTA News.
And then you are coming up to say that so much success rate had been recorded. So that's why a lot of people, meanwhile, those in the IDP camps now are saying, we don't have PVCs. So who did you give them to? An investigation revealed that what INEC simply did was to hand the PVCs to the heads of these communities. Again, you're talking about credible elections. And the PVC...
Handing them over to the heads, but not the individual persons that have actually...
And then the heads come back to them to say, well, we have distributed. Again, that's, there's a whole lot that needs to be corrected in the Nigerian project. Because even, we talked about the continuous voters registration. That was another allegation against INEC that INEC didn't have an answer to. That most of the exercises were conducted in the palaces of the emirs, where underage voters would come and be registered in the continuous voters registration exercise. And that tilted the number of registered voters in favor of a particular region of the country. And INEC was asked, your card reader can it identify an underage voter? And the answer was no. And one of the major fraud in our elections in the past is the use of underage voters by a section of the country, in which the card reader is going to encourage. Because the card reader is about your biometrics. It's about authenticating the fact that it is you. Now, it has nothing in there, because once it is seen to be you and verified to be you, by law, you should be allowed to vote, irrespective of your age.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting factor that you point out there.
No, I've not seen anyone. The list is there, so we are just taking it so you can see it later.
By the side, number.
It is presidential runoff. This one is house.
In the case of Abuja,
sure, INEC is ready. INEC is ready because, like I said, our materials are already available.
As they were retreating, they used this as shield because they saw the advancing troops their way. I don't want to comment on the figures because it is not clear exactly how many. The figures are varied. Some say 500, some say 400, some even say 300.
We voted for Jonathan in 2011. All Nigeria, we need Jonathan. But now, we need change.
We want him to finish what he has started for Nigeria, because since he has been there, there has been a lot of transformation, and we are happy.
The concentration and focus has remained at rescuing these girls. The general understanding is there that they are still within Nigeria, they are still within the general area, mission area, and that efforts must be consolidated at getting them. And that is why today, strategically, every effort is pushed towards the area that they are suspected to be in.
Having said that now, how would you then describe the stakes of Nigeria in the build-up to these elections? Do people still have confidence in the government?
A lot of people have confidence in the government. You know, just like every election year, people pitch their tent, depending on which side of the divide the individual finds himself. There are those who are in support of the government of the day, under the leadership of Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. Of course, there are others who are in favor of the opposition and their candidate. So, of course, whichever side of the divide you find yourself, you now have to come up with your strong reasons why you have identified with either camps. Many who have identified with the opposition have argued. They've argued that the country has not made as much progress as it should. They've argued that the party that the country has been under the leadership of the PDP in the last 16 years, and that there was need for an opportunity to be given to the opposition party to also have a shot at the seat of power, and then to see what difference they can also make. They've tried to run on the strength of anti-corruption. They've taken a hold of a perennial problem in the country, which is the issue of power, the inability of the government of the day to significantly improve the power situation in the country. When I say power, I mean electricity. That also has been considered. And then, of course, some people in the opposition have also tried to argue that the rate of unemployment in the country is also an issue, and they feel that the opposition could do something about it. Of course, they've argued the economy. And if you notice in the last few months, the price of crude oil, which is the major source of revenue for Nigeria, has significantly reduced, and that has affected the performance of the Nigerian economy, because it was largely based on the revenue it got from oil, because governments in the past have not thought it wise to diversify, to create other sources of revenue, and also help the economy to be a bit more balanced. And so with the crisis in the oil sector, the funds are not there for government to execute projects it had wanted to. So, and it's biting hard on the economy, and that has also affected the currency, where the Nigerian naira in the last 4 or 5 months has suffered serious setbacks, where it now exchanges for officially by 199 naira to a US dollar from about 140 something just over 4 or 5 months ago. So, and that is affecting business. So those who are there have lots of concerns, but now those who are with the president have also argued that the oil crisis is global, and that it is not a fault of the current administration, but rather the current administration has tried to respond to ensure that there is no crisis in the country, that the government does not shut down. It has also tried to, as it were, diversify the economy, because for the first time in the very recent years, we've seen, those who are with the president, this is the argument, that we've seen Nigeria beginning to look at the critical issue of addressing the power sector, because over time the power sector was run by government, and efforts by the Obasanjo administration to as it were privatize that sector, sell off some of the government assets, and allow private individuals come run the sector, hit a brick wall when the late President Yar'Adua came in. He cancelled that whole process and ordered a probe of that sector and government spending, where it was alleged that over $16 billion was spent, and there was nothing to show for what had been spent. So for 2 years, nothing happened. And these are not equipment that you can buy off the shelf. So and of course, investors lost confidence because of this policy inconsistency. Many of them had borrowed funds from banks. They were indebted. Many had ordered equipment that had landed at the ports, but those equipment could not be cleared, because where would you take them to? Demurrage setting. There was so much bills hanging on the necks of these investors, and they became disinterested. So Goodluck Jonathan, on assumption, when he became president, had that responsibility to kickstart, as it were, that privatization process again. Of course, there were legacy issues.
It's something that is in process as we speak.
Yeah, which he successfully achieved that.
Okay.
Yeah, because there were lots of legacy issues. The workers didn't want it to happen, but he felt that that was going to be the best for the country, because Nigeria as a government was spending so much, and it wasn't getting a commensurate value. I remember some time ago we were trying to talk about public service, in Nigeria, and how that people cannot really get the best from public service. So he succeeded, and today that sector has been wholly privatized, just like it was with telecoms in Nigeria in 2001, after the digital mobile licenses were auctioned and the operators came in. It wasn't very interesting at the beginning. I remember at the time you would have to make a minute call for up to 100 naira per minute. To acquire a SIM card, a mobile line, we paid as much as 60,000 naira at the time. But today, it is free. You can pick up a SIM card for free, and you can talk for about 12 naira
in
a
fact,
minute.
I must say that being in Nigeria, I have been in Nigeria several times, and it proves that the rates for the telephone charges are much cheaper compared to other places that I have been.
Good.
Very reasonable.
So that is the argument, that if the power sector is allowed to progress in the direction it is going, because the president came up with a roadmap for the power sector, and many believe that the power generation has increased, distribution capacity is being built, and the transmission capacity as well is also being built. All right, and then, but there has been some efforts by some saboteurs, as it were, to undermine the government of the day, because the pipelines that carry the gas, that supply the gas to the power stations, have come under serious attacks in the last few months, and that has significantly affected, the generation. But that is also being addressed now. That is an argument that the president has taken the power generation from a little over 2,000 megawatts to something in the neighborhood of 4,000 plus. And with what it has in its roadmap, if given the opportunity in another 4 years, Nigeria would experience a significant improvement in power supply. Now, they've also argued in agriculture that never a time in the history of our country have we seen a massive, revolution of the agriculture sector, where in the past there was corruption, where the fertilizers never got to the farmers. It was just in the hands of a syndicate, of a cartel. But when Jonathan came, he broke that barrier. And today, the average Nigerian farmer can access fertilizers. There are systems in place. Using technology, when your supply is ready, you receive an SMS, an alert, and then you go there at a subsidized rate, you procure what you're supposed to get, and then you go and apply it. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, we had a U-tide where there was no 1 kobo increase in the cost of food items. Over time, once it's approaching the U-tide, the cost of food, would just skyrocket, because it's U-tide, production is low, but today the production
is stable
and increasing, and the import also has reduced significantly. So many people argue that in itself is something important, and that he has gotten the country on a start.
Okay.
And he should be given the opportunity.
You're speaking more of President Goodluck Jonathan. Let's look at these two big contenders. We know we have other opposition parties that are also vying in this particular election, but there are two big contenders. That is President Goodluck Jonathan and General Muhammadu Buhari. How is Mr. Buhari's campaign? What is he bringing to the table?
Yeah, that was what I started with when I said that they are coming on the strength of his anti-corruption credentials, the state of the economy, the rate of unemployment in the country, and of course the inability of the successive government to ensure a significant improvement in power supply. So those are the same issues, that he's running with. But there's a problem. Now, looking at the anti-corruption posturing, as it were, he finds himself surrounded by persons who are believed to be extremely corrupt.
The issue of corruption, though, in Nigeria seems to be an issue that is spoken about more often than not. How do we end this corruption? What needs to be done? Can it actually be achieved?
Sure, it can. It's we as a people. When I say we as a people, whether government, whether the ordinary citizens, we have a responsibility to do whatever we can to make sure that we end this scourge called corruption, because that is the major bane of our country, of our inability, our inability to make the needed progress. The major challenge we've had to deal with is the issue of corruption, because we believe that if funds that have been set aside for certain government projects, if they are judiciously utilized, and if they are not diverted, if people who come into government don't come in to enrich themselves and their cronies, and if these monies will be used for what they've been budgeted for, that our country will be better, that the institution, the needed infrastructure that will promote development will be built. But how to make that happen? It's clearly something we all have to deal with collectively. Government has its role, and that's why I believe strongly that whoever wins this election would know that there are would come to terms with the real issues that are of concern to the average Nigerian, and of course, corruption is top on the list. Now, what we must do is to those who are in government, because government today in Nigeria is the biggest spender. And because the funds are considered free funds, and that is why, again, they would do anything to come into power. They would kill, they would maim, they would do anything, undermine the system, undermine the electoral process, just to make sure they get into office, not because they want to serve, but because they want to enrich themselves. And it begins again with elections. That's why I say we as a people, elections like this provide us the opportunity to make sure we choose candidates that would go in for the purpose of service and not to enrich themselves. And that was an advantage that many people thought that the opposition candidate had. But like I said, the problem with that is the fact that those who are sponsoring the candidate, who are surrounding, who have surrounded the candidate, this is the fourth time he's running, but this is the first time he's really posing a serious challenge to the ruling party. And many have argued, if you were to win this election, how would you effectively
change around things?
Change things for the better, because the same people whom we want you to deal with are the guys we're seeing around you. So that's why the anti-corruption credentials is not working with a section of the country, because many would have thought, if we didn't see these guys around you, because if you're really going to fight corruption, then these are the people you should also have on your list.
The independence of INEC has been severely compromised. As a Nigerian and a presidential candidate in the election, I share in the disappointment and frustration of this decision. We must not allow ourselves to be tempted into taking actions that could further endanger the democratic process. Our country is going through a difficult time in the hands of terrorists. Any act of violence can only complicate the security challenges in the country and provide further justification to those who would want to exploit every situation to frustrate the democratic process in the face of certain defeat at the polls.
Every election year has always been heated up in this country. I had an experience in 2003, I had an experience in 2007 and 11. Every election year in Nigeria is a heated year. So this is not an exception.
Yes, no one is shaken boy.
That's why it's been between. I'm okay. I won't look into corruption in the past. I will make sure going forward that that corruption is not condoned, because now they're having to grapple with that. Again, the government of the day has not done what it ought to do, and that again is one thing that's working against the current government. That in spite of what it may have done, many don't think that with regards to corruption, he has done enough, because with the way corruption has really affected our country, many would want a government to confront that evil called corruption by ensuring that the institutions of government that have been set up to deal with the issues that affect corruption are functioning effectively and efficiently, and that they are not, and that there is no interference from the executive, and that these agencies like the EFCC, like the ICPC, like the Anti-Fraud Department of the Police, that these agencies should be allowed to work. The Code of Conduct Bureau is there. That's supposed to look at government officials, people who came into government. What was your asset as at the time you came into government, and now that you have left, what are you worth today? How did you acquire your wealth? Now, these things are not being done, and I think that is one major problem that I think the ruling party's candidate, President Goodluck, it's really having a hard time explaining, because not much has been seen to have been done by his government to address the issue of corruption. Because again, you will give it to him. He was the one that said, let's take off subsidy from petroleum products, because this is one area the country is being, that the country's funds are being looted, because there are lots of lies about it. We are subsidizing what we are not seeing, because these petroleum products that are subsidized, when they are brought into the country, they are also taken out to other countries where they can be sold at a higher price, and then the people for whose sake it was subsidized don't really get.
They're not gaining. They're not benefiting.
They're not benefiting
from it.
But again, that couldn't work, because the same people on the other side of the divide sponsored a lot of citizens to take to the streets and say no to subsidy removal. But that, for me, again, this is what the president says, that he doesn't believe that you have to go after people, you have to cuff people.
I think I'm actually going to have to cut you short there. Our time is not permitting anymore. But here's my last question to you. Are you going to be in Nigeria on Saturday to vote?
Sure, I would be in Nigeria, not just to vote, but to monitor the exercise, and of course to ensure that Nigerians and the outside world are adequately informed as to what is really happening, how the process is being conducted, or being, excuse me, how the votes are being done. And of course, I look forward to an interesting time and hope that the outcome of the elections would be better for the country, and that the candidates themselves would also caution their supporters, because there's a lot of tension, and many have argued that whoever wins, there would be violence.
Either way, whether it's the PDP or whether it's
yes, because
Mr. Buhari.
The opposition believes that it is better positioned to win, and that if it doesn't win, then the president has rigged the elections. And then the president also believes that he is popular, and his party stands a better chance because they have better structure. The APC was founded a little over a year ago, and the majority of the people in the APC today were people who defected from the ruling party. And of course, they don't have as much a formidable structure, as it were, as the ruling party has. So either way, both parties are confident they would win the elections. And of course, that is one question that has been asked. If in a free and fair election, why do you think if you don't win the election,
then the elections have been rigged,
then the
and
elections
then
have
you
been
fight
rigged?
it?
Yeah. So the leadership of both parties, the leading candidates, have that responsibility to ensure that they caution their supporters, and Nigerians themselves should not allow themselves to be. Nigerians should not allow themselves to be deceived into taking to violence, because we are a growing society, we are a developing society, and we have institutions in place. We have a judiciary, and the courts are there. If you feel that the outcome of elections of an election didn't go in your favor because certain maybe malpractices occurred. We've seen in Nigeria over time where elections were upturned by the courts, and the candidates declared by the courts as winners were sworn in. So we have confidence that the courts will be able to do justice to these issues when they arise. But we just hope that people don't take laws into their hands. We are aware that soldiers have been deployed, even though the court, Lagos High Court, had ruled that the soldiers have no business with elections. But again, those who are in favor of deployment of soldiers have argued that the post-election violence in 2011 could have been contained if
the soldiers, the
if
military
the military were already on the streets, because the violence had erupted and the military had to find a way to come in, and before they could come in, lots of lives had been lost. So many have also argued that yes, you can be on the street, but please don't interfere with elections. Let voters go and make their choices. Don't influence who they vote for, and please don't change the outcome of the elections. Let the votes count, and of course, at the end of the day, after the votes have been cast, after the results have been announced and collated, of course, by the time the INEC chairman announces the overall results, we should have a new administration, whether it is the current president that emerges or the opposition candidate that emerges. They owe Nigeria a duty to make sure that Nigeria continues to make progress as a country.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and all the best in the upcoming elections.
Thank you.